to finish us off, the Navy was sending out 3 torpedo boats to launch torpedoes at us. But because of the torpedo attack that put a 29.5 by 40-foot hole in the starboard side, blown to smithereens, and immediately started flooding that area. It's hard for me to believe that some of us survived. 34 killed and 174 of us wounded out of a crew of 294. President Johnson got on the line and basically said, I don't care if the ship and everybody on board goes to the bottom of the Mediterranean, I'm not going to embarrass an ally. Here's Johnson, who already knew that it was Israel that was doing the attacking.
Yep.
And he wasn't going to embarrass them, except that if the ship had sunk and everybody on board disappeared, then would have brought the United States into the war had we sunk.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I am honored and delighted to be joined by Larry Bowen. Larry Bowen is a survivor and a Purple Heart recipient for his service on the USS Liberty. He is past president and currently part of the USS Liberty Veterans Association, and that's an organization that has spent the past 55 years telling their firsthand accounts of the USS Liberty attack, which, if you don't know about, you're about to get a deep dive into it. And it is an incredible event that goes virtually unspoken of in today's society. So, Larry, thank you so much for beaming in, brother. I'm so grateful for your time and honored to have you on the show.
Well, I'm thrilled that you contacted me, and I look forward to the interview. I've done several of them before, so I've got a pretty good idea of what to expect.
Well, we'll try and keep it a little far out going with my theme, but maybe we'll get to that at the end. There's a lot to go over. I before we even get going with that, I just want to express my gratitude to you for your service, my profound condolences for what you and your fellow crew endured beginning on June 8th, 1967. And I use that word beginning deliberately because for you guys and your families, this tragedy is ongoing. And there's been no true resolution, no true closure, and no true compensation for what y'all have been through. And I'm just grateful to have you on. And it takes great courage to speak out the way you guys do. And this is an incredible opportunity and history lesson for my listeners. So thank you, brother.
Okay. Well, you're welcome.
So let me start. I want to set the background a little bit. So everyone is like, wait, what's going on? So this was 1967. Israel was at war with Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Okay. I think it was called the 6-Day War, right?
That's correct.
And Israel, relatively young country at this time, just a few decades old. The USS Liberty is currently, armed with, an array of state-of-the-art technology. It is basically an espionage naval vessel. Is that accurate to say?
That's correct.
And you guys were outfitted with you guys had some of the best stuff you could have at that time, I think, right? It was pretty state-of-the-art.
Yeah, we were the most sophisticated intelligence collecting ship of the U.S. Navy at that time. That's
what I read. So you guys were patrolling international waters off the Egyptian coast, and I remember seeing the testimony about you guys literally went from kind of just doing your thing and having some laughs to being being absolutely attacked by fighter jets.
Absolutely.
This incident is so, it flies so under the radar, Larry. It's incredible to me. I've read a little bit about it, but it popped up for me a few months ago. And I was like, I do these short videos on these events that America would rather forget, and I'd rather remind them in any way I can.
Yeah.
And I read about this, and then I looked into it, and I was like, oh my God, this is even worse than it looks like from 20, from 20,000 feet. This looks like, it like plausibly an accident, but Israel's fighter jets attacked your naval vessel, and it was no accident. I mean, I don't even know how that can even be tossed around, let alone used as a national excuse to you guys who were there, and we're going to get into the reasons why it could not have been an accident, which I'm sure you guys are very well aware of by now.
Yeah.
And also, some of the reasons why this was attempted, and thank God, failed. But to finish off this setting, okay, so there was a lot going on at the time, right? And you guys were in international waters, probably there to support our ally Israel, right? I mean, that's basically what you were doing there.
Well, the cover story was that we were over there to assist with communications and to provide a platform for U.S. personnel who were in Tel Aviv at the time and needed to evacuate if the war got that critical. Now that was what the press was told. So the fact that we were there doing our job, which was, classified, but it's when you're in the intelligence business, there's a lot that you can say or can't say.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, we were monitoring the activities that were going on in the area at the time. And that was both sides. So.
Right. Of course. Not exactly a clandestine operation for any country to be doing, particularly with its close allies when there's much heated, kind of, let's call them conversations happening. They were on the brink, I think, if not already trading fire, right? I mean, was it right before it started, or was it already going down?
The war was actually in the fourth day of the 6-day war.
Oh, okay, that's
so
right.
On June 8th was the fourth day, and we had just gotten on station that morning. So, our presence was well known to the Israelis. They actually had us on their game board, I guess, or war board to show that they had overflown us. They knew we were an American ship and exactly where we were at. Now, whether or not they knew exactly what we were doing is still a question, I guess. But
yeah, you could call it a question. I mean, based on your outfit, based on the antenna, based on what they could see that you had, what they could sense with their radars, I'm sure that they understood that you weren't exactly the most armed vessel strolling in from the United States. I mean, that even back then, we certainly had the technology to be able to tell that. I think I remember you guys, the most you had on the ship was a few 50 calibers.
Yeah, we had 4 50 caliber machine guns, 2 forward and 2 aft, and they were wiped out on the first strike, on the first pass.
Why don't you take us through that day and what happened? Because where we're going with this, guys, is Israel attacked an American vessel. They would later, and the shit that happened after they attacked is something that you have to hear, and Larry's going to tell us to believe, because it is if you try to tell this story, people are going to be like, that's conspiracy theory. That didn't happen. And I know, because when I tell the story, that's what I get. And I'm like, listen, every word I told you is true. Every single word. There is not a single theoretical syllable in what I have shared with you, telling them this story, Larry. And people don't They don't believe it. They can't believe it. They don't want to believe it. I think that's part of the reason why this has stayed under the radar, because it's so heinous. It's unbelievable. But why don't you take us through that day if you can?
Yeah. I mean, that morning I had a day watch down in Radio Research 1, which is our branch collections area. During that day, I happened to be copying one of the transmitters from one of the nations, and the messages that were coming across were very high priority, and they were alluding to the fact that they were going to attack a target. Didn't identify the target, but in those messages it spelled out how they were going to do it, with their Air Force coming in with fighter jet, attack using 50 caliber machine guns and rockets, and then they would supplement that with other aircraft with napalm, and then to finish us off, the Navy was sending out 3 torpedo boats to launch torpedoes at us. All of this was pretty well spelled out in messages, and those messages never got back to Washington. They never got, I'm not sure where they ended up, but because of the torpedo attack that put a 29.5 by 40-foot hole in the starboard side, the comm center, our processing and reporting center, our linguists, and the Radio Research 1, where I was at, all got, just blown to smithereens, and immediately started flooding that area. So for us, we knew that there was, that we were in a war zone. We knew that there was a potential for hostilities, but in our mind, because Israel had been overflying us all morning, we were confident that, they had our back, that, being an ally, they were going to protect us. And even though comms suggested that somebody was going to get hit, we didn't know that it was us.
Right.
So at early afternoon, around 12 or 12:15, the skipper decided to have a general quarters drill, and that gets everyone up and about and to the general quarters stations, which in my case moved me from Radio Research 1 to one level higher, in a small communications room with a T-brancher, a maintenance person, and myself. And we were told that we were going to continue doing our mission up there in this other communications room. And I mean, if it didn't save my life, it certainly made my life a lot easier, because I wasn't in the flooded compartment when the torpedo hit. But the torpedo, when it hit, threw all of us from the deck up to the overhead. For non-Navy people, that would be the ceiling. And back down. I had a concussion. I had shrapnel wounds in my thigh that I don't know if it came from equipment that was blown out of the racks, or if it came later. I didn't realize it until 2 days later, when I had a medical exam on board the ship, and they just asked me to disrobe, and I saw the 3 gashes in my thigh. They asked me how I got them, and I couldn't tell them. I don't know. I mean, it was just, there was so much chaos at that time. Um, but for that particular day, the strafing occurred first, then the napalm, then some more strafing, and then after the aircraft got through with their damage, the torpedo boats came out and launched 5 torpedoes. Uh,
Wow.
Fortunately for us, only one torpedo hit the ship, and it hit us in an area where watertight integrity on the board was probably better than anywhere else on the ship.
Wow.
So we were able to contain the damage to that, you know,
Yeah.
comm center, processing center, and radio research one. We closed off all the hatches and everything, and made sure that it was so watertight. And after the torpedo hit, we got to one of the hatches to let our crew members out of the
Yeah.
area that was hit. So, but for anyone to think that it was merely an accident is just inconceivable for us. I mean, because
Yeah.
we know that they knew who we were. Uh, a an airman from Israel refused to fire on the ship.
That's right.
Because he saw the American flag. He reported it back to ground control, and ground control told him to hit the target.
Mm-hmm.
And this information didn't get publicized until probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years after the fact.
Yeah.
But even that didn't convince Congress that they needed to investigate this thing further, because there was never a congressional investigation into the attack. The United States accepted their weak excuse that it was a mistaken identity. They thought we were an Egyptian horse ship.
Total horse.
Total. And it was, I mean, that, there's no similarities at all to between the two ships. But
no, I mean, not to mention really big written right on the ship what it said. The name, the USS Liberty, was freshly painted on the stern. And these naval vessels carry very distinctive numbers, and these were obvious. This was obviously the vessel of America, right? It's like if you look at a Chinese character or a word in English, are you going to have any trouble figuring out which is which? No, that's how these guys are trained to see exactly, to make visual contact, confirmation with the target. Yep. It's an insult to people's intelligence, to anyone with modicum of intelligence, to even try to pass this off the way they did. And I mean, it's no, I'm sure you've more than thought about this, but it's obviously no accident where that first torpedo went, and I know you guys would later go on to learn that, it was because you guys, the first thing you did when you were hit was you attempted to put out just a distress signal or a distress frequency, right?
Right. And the distress signals, the frequencies were being jammed by Israel, and so they didn't want us to be able to tell anyone what was going on, and they had knocked out all of our transmitting antennas on one of the first passes with the jets. Mm-hmm. So we had a third-class petty officer, Terry Halbardier, who was in the Radio Shack and was told that they didn't have a transmitting antenna, but they had one antenna that was cold that needed to be wired. So Terry volunteered to take the coax cable out, climb up onto the antenna, and connect it. And at that time, we were able to get out a distress signal uh, saying we were under attack. The USS Saratoga got the message and immediately launched aircraft to come to our aid. The then they notified Washington, what they were doing. In Washington, Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, said, "I want those planes recalled."
Of course he did.
Didn't give a reason for it. He just said he wanted them recalled. Well, Admiral or Captain Tully on the Saratoga thought that maybe McNamara thought that they were still armed with nuclear weapons because they had a nuclear weapons drill in the Sixth Fleet that day. And so Tully reconfigured his aircraft with conventional weapons and launched again. And once again, McNamara came on the line and says, "I told you I wanted those planes on the deck, recall the planes."
Yep.
And at that time, Admiral Geiss, Sixth Fleet commander, got on the line and said, "I want it from higher authority." That's when, President Johnson got on the line and basically said, "I don't care if the ship and everybody on board goes to the bottom of the Mediterranean. I'm not going to embarrass an ally." Now, what's stuck in our craw for all these 56 years is here's Johnson, who already knew that it was Israel that was doing the attacking.
Yep.
And he wasn't going to embarrass them, except that, we didn't know who was attacking us. We thought it was Egypt.
Right.
And we didn't identify it because we couldn't identify the planes. The planes were all blackened out. So it wasn't until the torpedo boats came up and we saw the Star of David that we realized that it was Israel, but that was well after the fact.
Yeah.
And, Johnson, to know
as
exactly
corrupt
who was doing the attacking has really stuck in our craws that, we were set up, that we were sent over there to be part of a master plan that would have brought the United States into the war had we sunk.
Had you sunk.
If the ship had sunk and everybody on board disappeared, then they could have, continued with their plan.
That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And McNamara and Johnson, both, I would say just about as corrupt as politicians can be. McNamara, obviously, was around for Kennedy. Unfortunately, Johnson, that is about as crooked and corrupt as a politician as maybe has ever. And that's saying something. He is leading the pack. And there's been some seriously corrupt politicians just in the last 20 years, 30 years. We've had some of the most corrupt, but out in the forefront, leading the way, instead of being in prison where he belonged, was Lyndon Johnson, and there's a wake of bodies that have followed in his political career. But man, it doesn't surprise me at all that when you say the word McNamara and Johnson and they recalled, it's a miracle that you guys made it through. And it was a few things that happened. One of them being there was so that you had resistance on both ends. They thought you guys were going down. You didn't. It makes me wonder if the people, in those torpedo boats, and at least maybe one or two of them, and the people who were quote following orders, were not, very, maybe even subconsciously not okay with what they were doing. Sometimes you pull a shot, you pull a punch when your heart's not in what you're doing, when it's wrong, right? I feel like maybe that had something to do with it, because they could have. You guys were sitting ducks. I mean, they could have.
Yeah, they should have been able to finish us off.
Yeah,
If the intent was to sink us, they could have sent out more torpedo boats. They could have, sent out more aircraft with more
yeah,
ammunition. Um, and like I said earlier, one of the pilots refused to comply with these orders, and he was
that's right.
reprimanded, I guess, when he got back to
He
the
was
Air Force.
arrested, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I think he was. And but the rest of them continued to follow orders because that's what you do when you're in the military.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just
It,
it's hard for me to believe that they could follow through with something like that.
mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
it's hard for me to believe that some of us survived.
yeah.
You had 34 killed and 174 of us wounded out of a crew of 294. So it was over 70% of the crew
Yeah.
was either killed or wounded. And, we were still able to salvage the ship and,
My God.
make rendezvous with the Sixth Fleet the following day. But that's another thing. Here we were, just dead in the water for a while, and we didn't get any assistance from the Sixth Fleet or anyone else for about 18 hours.
My God.
So we had one doctor and two corpsmen on board, and they were doing everything humanly possible to try and keep
Yeah.
the wounded,
Yeah.
safe as they could, and fix their wounds as best they could. But with only one surgeon, he was pretty much resigned to doing what
Yeah.
he could for the more seriously wounded.
I mean, the fact that they went after the lifeboats. Listen, what's worth mentioning also is there's two kinds of frequencies that when you put out a distress call, right? There's the tactical, and then there's
Right.
well, I should say, because one is the international distress, right?
Right.
And
Right.
the other is tactical. And so, I guess during that time, and probably still today, even if tactical is jammed, which can happen, if an enemy is going to, intercept a ship, but it's absolutely a violation of international law for them to jam your distress signal line, right? Your distress frequency, or whatever they call it.
Absolutely. And it was a violation of international law by their shooting up our
Lifeboats.
lifeboats. And
Wow.
nothing has been done to try and resolve any of the issues that we had that were war crimes, and yet they Congress should have investigated whether or not they did it back in 1967 or whether or not they do it today. It's still a valid complaint that we, the crew members, have. And you mentioned at the onset that hasn't been any closure for us. Every time we try and get an audience with Congress or the president, it kind of falls on deaf ears. And
I wonder why.
I mean, I know that the Israeli lobby is strong here in the United States.
Yeah.
And that most of the politicians are, recipients of their generosity when they
certainly,
up for re-election. Yeah. And so for the politicians to go against the, their prize cow there with they don't say anything negative, and it's not all Israel. I mean, it's, you
No,
know,
it's not.
and I've never held any animosity against, you know, my Jewish friends or,
Yeah,
you know, the Israeli people in general. But
yeah,
the Zionists that were associated with this act should have been brought to justice, and
yeah.
they weren't.
And they weren't, and they never will be because, well, maybe they will be one day. I mean, or at least there will be some kind of justice. You know, the the JFK movie that they made with Kevin Costner all those years later. It was one of the Stones made it. One of the directors was his last name was Stone, not Roger, the other guy. I don't know. One of them got arrested for being Trump's friend. Pretty sure that was the charge. Um, and the other one, his brother was a filmmaker, a director, and he was he was always tackling these very controversial um, subjects, and so he did JFK. Now, of course, the CIA, was the CIA and Hollywood love to work together. They're always sharing stories. Unfortunately, what they're sharing is, pretty. It's usually a misdirection, right? Even if it's a great movie, like JFK was a great movie. I don't know if you ever saw Argo with Ben Affleck.
Oh no, I haven't.
That's a great movie. And that's a movie about the Iran hostage situation where America went in and rescued the hostages. They were Canadian hostages. It's a fluff piece, but it's a great movie. But you could tell, I mean, like, it makes the CIA look like freaking superheroes,
Sure.
but the movie JFK was made, and it had such an impact and was so well done. And what they were doing was misdirecting people from the perpetrators and the orchestrators of the JFK assassination. And then, but they knew that they could easily do that if they open the book and show people that, of course, you're right. It wasn't a lone gunman. It was probably more than one gunman. Of course, that leads people right back to where they started, which is nowhere. Meanwhile, the people like Lyndon Johnson and, Prescott Bush and these cats who, the oil tycoons who arranged for this incredible, and terrible day that when JFK was shot, they're fine with that. I mean, it's all fingers pointed everywhere, but where it should be. But what happened was Congress ended up opening an investigation and demanding that things be turned over and investigated, and that was like almost 30 years, 40 years later. So, well, if you're handicapped because it's Israel, right? And everybody knows. I don't want to sound like Kanye West, but Hollywood and Israel, they work together a lot. That's there's a lot of people who on both sides, and of course, you could make the same remark about many other places, including China. China has a lot of money invested in Hollywood, and they have a say in how they're portrayed, right?
Right.
And I am not saying anything against the Jewish people at all, because I have, I think every Jewish person I know is a good person. I don't know any Jewish people who really are. I'm like, that guy's a bastard. I don't know any of them,
Right.
But who we're talking about right now, they use nations and religion and these things to hide behind. They know it's a great front. They know it protects them, but those are the people who I think, the reason why you get no traction is because those are the people who orchestrate these events, events like JFK, events like, I mean, this event would have ended up being like a Pearl Harbor had they succeeded. It would have ended up being like a 9/11. This event is one of a long list of false flag events staged and orchestrated by, um, elements of a government that is as corrupt can be. And of course, we have counterparts in Israel and in almost every government. that we work with. Not all the people. I'm not saying that the entire government is corrupt. I mean, most of them are paid to look the other way, but at the highest level, unfortunately, some of the most powerful people who get in there because of how corrupt they are, and because of how much money gets behind them. That's why Kennedy had to go. And God, I mean, Lyndon Johnson, you couldn't have had a worse president to call when this happened.
Right.
If Kennedy, I don't even think they would have tried it with Kennedy, but when he was taken out of the picture, I think they were like emboldened. I mean, even at that point. But you guys, I'm sure, have a lot of have done more than your fair share of research about what they might have been attempting. I was thinking like, they had to wait 30 years to create. And I say this and I have to be careful because I have to remind myself that not everyone has been disclosed the full facts about what happened on September 11th in 2001, but everybody knows what happened afterwards. So leaving that alone, which I would make a strong argument to anyone that day was very similar to this day, with the exception of they failed on this day, and you guys, thank God, survived. And on 9/11, they succeeded. I feel like these are and I'm willing to bet that some of the same parties, families, parts of government that are responsible. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. The actual mission, I guess, to have us sunk and no survivors would have allowed the United States to launch a nuclear attack against Cairo. And actually the Sixth Fleet confirmed that and said that they were prepared to go into Cairo, and they had aircraft, they had
holy shit
troops on board to go on shore, but that all became a moot point when we didn't sink, and so in our minds we could have very easily prevented a World War III simply by surviving, because Russia was supporting the Egyptians, and when Israel made their attack on Egypt, they wiped out the biggest part of their air arsenal on the first day of the war, and those were Russian MiGs, and they had Russian pilots, so it wasn't like we could have gotten out of there without a major confrontation with Russia, but because Israel failed to do what they were supposed to do, then all the rest of it was just put on a back burner. And there's been a lot of documents that have been held from the public and from us. I mean, we do a FOIA request, at least annually, to try and get release of some 300 plus pages of documents that may shed a little more light on, what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And right now there's a judge out in the state of Washington that has ruled on the government's point that the stuff was classified and needed to be retained as classified documents. And she said she's reviewed it and can't see any reason why they can't be released. And informed the government that they had 30 days to get back with another rebuttal, or else she was going to, hold him, to
Yeah.
releasing the documents. And I haven't heard whether or not the government's come back with their second rebuttal or not. But
Maybe they've been busy.
yeah, I'm not sure doing what. But,
Yeah, me either. I don't know. Not well.
Coming up with another story as to why they couldn't release it.
Yeah, they're good at that.
Oh yeah,
they're real good at that. I mean, I feel like they used to be. Sometimes they think they're good and they're terrible, like this nonsense,
Yeah.
But what happens is when you lead with trauma, it's easy to distract people and then convince them of things. When something like this happens and it's terrible, the mind kind of reels. And then it's easy to distract. I mean, 9/11 was a perfect example. Everyone was so traumatized by what they saw that by the time the government tried to, literally put out the story that jet fuel gets hot enough to melt steel, which is not physically possible. I mean, according to the laws of physics that I understand, and that anybody who's a scientist and studies fire and can tell you that an orange flame only gets so hot, and that temperature is about almost 1,000 degrees too cold to melt steel. But once it's done, and they show it over and over and over, and then by the time explanations come out, no one's even paying attention anymore, And then the people who say, wait a minute, they just hit them. The media either silences them inevitably or just calls them conspiracy theorists. They've been doing the same thing since JFK. And it's terrible, and then you have parts of the government who are every bit of as victim as the people who were in that building. And then you have a very, very small percentage at this point in time, the top brass of the government, Cheney. And I mean, the fact that Halliburton, the whole thing stinks to high heaven. I probably don't have to tell you, you've probably been much more suspicious of your government since this happened than you were before it happened. But even if you aren't, I can tell you it's a shit show. It's every bit a shit show that this day and these explanations that you were met with is, even if it doesn't seem so on the surface. I mean, so was JFK, but I just feel like you guys, in all likelihood, surviving the way you did, you absolutely did prevent what would have been World War III. And it seems like they're still hell bent on starting it. So, makes me believe there's definitely a higher power looking out for this crazy race of people here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
there's both the Twin Towers had their elevator systems reworked either a year or 2 years before 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an Israeli contractor that was
that's right,
responsible for that. And part of the, I'll call it conspiracy theory,
mm-hmm.
was that they were certainly in a position to put detonating devices in the elevator shafts to help bring down both towers.
Yep.
And I know that information came out, probably in the 80s or 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But it's who to trust anymore.
No, you don't. And I remember seeing. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Bill Cooper? He's
no.
So he was in naval intelligence in the 50s. He was in the Army first, and then he joined the Navy and was working in naval intelligence, I think from 1950, 1954. And he had some clearance. You know, he was going through some pretty intense stuff. But he began to see the corruption, and you know, eventually he left the military and he started a civilian, the largest civilian analyst network, data network that ever existed for as long as it did. I mean, Bill Clinton called his radio show the biggest threat to national security ever to hit the airwaves. It's like, so you know, he was doing something right if Clinton was calling him out. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say he was like the Alex Jones of his time, because Alex Jones has made some mistakes and said some things that were, you know, I don't know if he was fed information that, you know, because they wanted to bring him down. This is what they do to people who, you know, say too much and get a national, you know, show. But Bill Cooper was one of the first people. And so in June of 2001, and on his radio show, he said he just got word that the CIA and CNN took a camera crew into Afghanistan to interview bin Laden. And he said that now this is supposed to be one of the most wanted men on the planet. And he's like, and I'm telling you that they just went in and did an extensive series of interviews with him. And I don't know what they're planning, he said, but the word that he got was that Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization, was going to attack either Israel or the United States, and they were going to blame it on Osama bin Laden. That's what his tip told him. He said in June, this was June, I think June 11, 2001, and he said, so whatever they say and whatever they do, don't you believe it? And God, he didn't live that long after that. He was gunned down in his driveway a few years after that. I mean, they ran him off the road. He was paralyzed. They couldn't take him out, and he was always armed. So he was problematic, but he always said he was going to go out shooting. But I mean, like, I have this clip. I have the day it aired. It's like, and there were so many people who knew about that day. So many things. It reminds me a lot of, you know, the way that America coordinates, not America, but parts of the government coordinate with parts of that government, which we know from World War II, we helped create that state, you know? And there's a lot of money in that state. And that's one of the reasons why they're powerful allies of ours and why they have such sway over our politicians and, you know, people at the top parts of our government. Talking about some of the most wealthy and powerful families and people in the world, you know, I mean, like, they make our national debt. That's what they have, like, in one of their bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
one of the things that we didn't discuss was the aftermath of the attack, when we were told by Admiral Ike Kidd that we were never to talk about it.
Oh my God! I'm so glad you brought it up.
You know, anyone at all, especially the media. But he said, you know, your family, your loved ones.
Wow!
Don't say a word to anyone about this, or we will be put in prison, or fined, or both. And
wow!
You know, it was.
If it was an accident, Larry, why would they say that to you? If it was truly an accident, why would they threaten you for talking about that accident?
Well, because we had information to prove that it wasn't an accident, and we've never been allowed to, you know, discuss that with Congress. And, you know, we're not getting any younger. I mean, I'm 76, and I'll be, you know, 77 next month.
You look great, my friend.
Running out on us.
You look great, man.
The clock's running down. But hopefully we'll get our answers that we're looking for.
I hope so too, brother. Where can I get a hat like that?
This was a specially made hat. I was actually in a restaurant in Watkins Glen, New York, and I've got a sticker on the back of my car, about the USS Liberty and,
Mm-hmm.
what happened. And a gentleman and his wife were sitting at a table two tables away from my son and I, and he asked me if that was my car, and I said yes. He says, "Well, did you know someone on the Liberty, or?"
Yeah.
And I says, "I was actually on the Liberty that day." And he said, "You have to come to my house." He had all this, documentation from what had happened, newspaper articles, and all this other stuff. And he had a sign hanging up in his kitchen that, basically called Israel and the United States liars for even considering it to be an accident. And he said, "I want you to have this." And then, one of them were the hats. He had hats that he gave my son and I. And I don't know how many of them he has, but
those are awesome.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That has been cool. Yeah, he was like, "You got to come over." He said, "You got to come over." Wow. How he was just passionate about it? What was his attachment to it?
Well, he was just thoroughly disgusted with the whole incident and what little bit was being said about it. And again, Israel controls the U.S. media pretty much, just like you mentioned Hollywood.
Yeah.
So trying to get news broadcasts to cover the story is impossible.
Yeah.
We thought we were going to have Fox cover it at one point, and then they backed out at the last minute. But none of the major networks will even consider talking to us.
All these years, and none of them. I mean, because the press used to be a little freer than it is now. But I mean, for something like this, is I can see that you guys were going to have trouble from the word go because it's Israel.
Well, and it's still a very controversial subject.
Yeah.
So I had a group of 8th graders from West Virginia come over here to Maryland to put on a play about the USS Liberty. And we wanted to do the play at National Security Agency in their theater to let people there, who hadn't heard about it or wanted more information about it, could come and see it. And the caretaker of the National Cryptologic Museum wouldn't allow it. And I said, "These are 8th graders. This is a project that they did for recognition in the state of West Virginia.
Yeah.
And they won their state competition. Now they wanted to come over here for a national competition that was being conducted at the University of Maryland. And so while they were over here, they wanted to do it, at the National Security Agency, at the National Cryptologic Museum." And caretaker said, "No, it's too controversial." And I ultimately got a American Legion Post 276 here in Maryland, allowed us to put it on in their, I guess it's their conference room. The kids were thrilled that they got to meet somebody from the USS Liberty.
Yeah.
And it just made them that much prouder, I guess, about what they were doing and the fact that they were trying to get the message out.
My God, we need more of that with our young people and in our schools right now.
Yeah, well, I know.
Certainly do. But so they sat you guys down. I mean, and they told you not to tell your families about what happened. I mean, and they said if you spoke to the media that they threatened you with that you would go to that you would do time or be locked up, right?
Right.
Wow. That is just, I mean, it's, go ahead.
That's really hurt a lot of us in terms of trying to get closure on it, because you don't understand what was being said. I mean, at the time you were, a military person and you were following military orders.
Yeah.
But when an admiral tells you to shut up and not say a word, that's what we did. That's
Yeah.
what most of us did. The first gentleman to write a book about the Liberty was Jim Ennis, and he wrote a book called Assault on the Liberty. That came out either 1979 or 1980, and that book covered a lot of what happened.
Yeah.
And once that book hit the press, some of the other crew members decided, well, if Jim can get away with it,
yeah,
maybe we can. So there've been several books out now regarding the Liberty. And
what's the best one that you've read?
all of it's Remember the Liberty by Phil Nelson. He's
cool.
A journalist down in I think North Carolina or South Carolina, and he's done an excellent job of covering exactly what happened, given factual information about the Thomas More Commissioner's Report, which was Thomas More getting 4 or 5 other flag ranked officers to conduct an investigation that he was orchestrating, and they came up with the fact that the attack was not an accident,
right?
And they made some recommendations that the government should conduct a full and comprehensive review of the incident and everything around it. And if Congress wouldn't do it, then they recommended that the Navy do it with congressional oversight. Again, Congress being a pawn of Israel was one area that he felt very comfortable in saying, well, the Navy's a military organization, so have the Navy do the investigation. And it takes a burden off the congressman when it comes time for re-election. But,
that's right. And then you don't have to worry about whoever the hell they would put in charge of doing it themselves. You guys would be able to do it yourselves. What happened? It got killed.
Yeah.
Figures.
It was actually read into the congressional record. I think it's record number E. I don't know. I better not say because I don't know exactly the number now. But it was in the congressional record back in October of 2003.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the whole report was in there. I've got copies of the commission, that report.
Okay.
But it's the only thorough investigation that was done by a non-sanctioned group, Admiral Moore and his, flag officers.
Yeah. Well, Israel's investigation was a joke. I mean, I guess the Israeli Defense Forces did a review of the incident, and it's almost as bad as, if not just as bad as, they said that they could not determine its country of origin, which is, of course, just, you have to be eating lead paint chips to actually try and conceive how that would be. They're Israeli. It's the Israeli Defense Forces. Of course, they knew what the ship was and who it was and where it was. Not even to get into the other things, but it's like I don't know. It boggles my mind, Larry. Like what the amount of assault and insults on the intelligence of the American people that comes from our government. It boggles my mind. It continues to boggle my mind. I can't watch the news anymore. It's just, it's hard for people. a lot of people to believe. And I posted a video on the social media sites, about this incident. And sometimes I feel like, the more ignorant people are, the more they feel the need to make their voices heard, and people just comment like, this is you conspiracy theory nutters. And I'm like, what? There's nothing theoretical about this, about what happened. It's all been very well documented. It's just not been allowed to actually come out because it's an embarrassment to the elements that attempted it and failed miserably. Thank God they failed. And, it's an honor to talk to you, Larry. You are a true hero, and everyone on your crew that was put through this, man, my heart goes out to you guys. And I'm grateful for your service. It takes nothing away from the dedication that you guys have given to our country. It's just a shame that we have these shady ass people in our government who, are willing to do anything for money, anything to further their agenda. It's power and control. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate your time. I'm happy and delighted to be bringing this to my listeners, because not a lot of people know about this event. It's been well suppressed, and continues to be well suppressed. So anytime I can throw a cog into the wheel of that suppression, I'm happy to do so, Larry. And it's an honor to do so on your behalf. And I appreciate your time, man. Thanks, Larry.
Take care. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.